What's going on there, guys? Good evening. It's your Earth Master here on this Wednesday, October 12th, 2022 date. It is about 8:36 p.m. California time here along the West Coast. Latest earthquake looks like a 2.6 out there in Oklahoma. Notice a pretty good swarm of earthquake movement kicking off out there. I have issued an earthquake watch for this area. Things are starting to ramp up, and they have been ramping up for a little while. I'm going to bring up the Usgs map here. This is just over the last 24 hours here. We got about 10 just jumped up to 11 earthquakes right now. Things really kicking up here around the Dover and the Kingfisher, Oklahoma area. Let me back out here and show you exactly where we're at. We're northwest here of the Oklahoma City area, OKC area. I want to bring up the 7 days all magnitudes map. And you know what? Let's bring up the 30 days here. I wonder if we can include some more in that little cluster, or a large cluster of earthquakes, I should say. About 183 earthquakes or so, 182 for a pretty good swarm out here around the Dover area of Oklahoma. That's a lot of earthquake activity, folks. The 7 days here, 133. So we're missing about, about 50 or so. So for a week time period, 133 earthquakes, that's a lot of movement, folks. And I can't say I've ever seen a significant swarm like this at all in Oklahoma since I've been watching earthquake activity and studying earthquake activity. So there's a lot going on out here. The largest magnitude was a 3.5. We are noticing a migration here. Notice this? Older movement earthquake activity here in the white circles. That's some of the older movement, well over a week. The weak activity appears in the yellow, and the day activity in the orange. The red activity in the circles there in the last hour. So notice this migration of earthquake activity here across the region, and that's a pretty good indication here of something about ready to possibly be on the larger side. It's not only due to the multitude of earthquakes out here in Oklahoma, but also this little migration kind of pointing up here towards the northeast. And what we have out there is quite a bit of oil and pumping operations out there all over the place. And I'm not for certain as to why this one's getting hit so hard with all the activity. I can't really find any specific fault systems out here in the area of the Oklahoma region. Let me go. Let me check something here real quick. I'm going to go over here to the Usgs map here. Stand by for just a second while I get this pulled up. I was going to check this earlier and I forgot. This is kind of a little bit better layout of the fault systems out here that the Usgs has put out across the region and across the states here. But it doesn't look like they're showing too much here for the Oklahoma area. Notice there's a couple out here outside of the Lawton area, but and also the New Madrid zone. So it's a little odd, folks. Let me go back here. I was hoping to maybe spot a fault system up here, but I can't see any at all. Again, a lot of pumping operations out here, fracking not fracking operations, but oil pumping operations and wastewater injection wells. There's quite a few operations out here. Some ponds. That's not a beautiful swimming pool out there. That's for certain. There is a creek or some type of river that runs up along here. I don't believe that plays a part in anything as to what we're seeing here. But the migration of these earthquakes here towards this little region of quite a bit more operations is a little on the puzzling side. And that's got me to believing that we may be seeing something much bigger about ready to happen here in Oklahoma. How much bigger is a good question. Let's take a look at historical data out here. So I pulled up 4.5 earthquake activity out here just in the state of Oklahoma since about 1400, but it doesn't go back that far. But I just wanted to make sure we got all the bases covered here. And the area that we're looking at here is just to the northwest of the OKC area, Kingfisher area. And if you look up here, Kingfisher, not a whole lot of historical data when it comes to 4.5 and above. But as an average out here for the state of Oklahoma, I've seen some upper fives. And the looks like the most recent one, let's see here, at least the most recent larger earthquake was a 4.5 way up around the Medford area. Far as these larger magnitudes, the 5.8 struck north of the Pawnee area, Stillwater, Oklahoma, back in 2016. I remember that. It did some damage out there. Prior to that, looks like about 5 years back, we had a 5.7 a little bit further south, east of OKC area. That was in 2011. And it looks like back in 1882, there was one further south. There's a line of fives out here that kind of stretch across the region. But specifically around the Kingfisher area, not a whole lot. So I'm kind of thinking, though, that we may fill in this little gap out here pretty soon with all this swarming activity that we're seeing. Within this region, it looks like a 4.5 back in 2015 was the largest. But there's definitely been a series of some larger earthquake activity out there. And I think it's something to watch pretty closely. There's a little bit of tectonic summary on the 2016 M5.8 earthquake. Looks like it was a result of shallow strike slip faulting. The earthquake occurred within the interior of the North American plate, far from any plate boundaries, obviously. So in general, it is very difficult to correlate earthquakes to specific faults in the region, and identification of the fault responsible for this event will require further study. Out there's not a whole lot of info on it, but they do mention here about a rapid increase in induced earthquakes over the past 7 years, and this was put out back in 2016 when that earthquake struck. I'm going to read this because it's pretty important. Since 2009, rates in some areas, such as Oklahoma, have increased by more than an order of magnitude. Okay, scientific studies have linked the majority of this increased activity to wastewater injection in deep disposal wells in several locations. Okay, I've been talking about that for quite a bit. Such investigations usually address the process by which the suspected triggering activity might have significantly altered stresses in the bedrock at the earthquake source, and they commonly address the ways in which the characteristics of the suspected human-triggered earthquakes differ from characteristics of natural earthquakes in the region. So we all know, and we study this a lot, that a lot of these earthquakes that strike out here throughout Oklahoma, Texas, sometimes in the southern Kansas as well, are around massive amounts of oil fields. This 5.8 that struck out here, see what we got. Shall we? Let's go ahead and zoom in here a little bit. These kind of already look like some type of areas that may have quite a bit of oil pumping operations out here. And these are going to be these little squares throughout the land. This is a little, I'm not for sure what that is. Maybe a little farmhouse or something. But some of these other sites here that have these just plain squares, and there's a lot of them, and not specifically so many in this area as there is in some areas of the state, but there is a bunch throughout the region, folks. And over here as well, there's a lot. Some of these look older, and I suspect these older ones, the ones that are not really active anymore, not producing any oil, are the ones that will be showing some larger quakes. I don't think these newer ones show up too much in terms of larger earthquake activity, but it's the older ones that kind of eventually catch up and kick off these larger earthquakes. So the swarm that we're seeing, folks, is definitely abnormal for Oklahoma standards. We're talking 133 earthquakes in the last 7 days, 182 in the last 30 days. And prior to that, there wasn't really a whole lot here. So migration, the multitude, the magnitudes here, a good indicator of something, a pretty good chance, I think, of seeing something bigger. How much bigger is remains to be seen. But we do know we can get some upper fives out here. So just a heads up for the Oklahoma area. And this sits up about 30 miles east, or northwest, I should say, northwest of the OKC area. And I think a 5.8 out there would probably be felt pretty broadly throughout the Oklahoma area. Kind of curious to see what that 5.8, that was a ways away, a little bit further away from the OKC area than this current swarm. But if you look here, look at how broadly this 5.8 was felt there in Oklahoma in 2016, all over the place. So a little bit closer to the Oklahoma City area could do some damage to that region. If we were to have a magnitude 5.8, half that distance easily, where the Kingfisher area is. But this was felt all over through Kansas and quite a few other states. So heads up, Oklahoma. I absolutely love that state, but it's also, it's damaged. The damage is there, and the potential for some earthquakes are looking likely here around the Dover area and the Kingfisher region. So just a heads up. And if you look, a lot of this earthquake activity has been pretty rapid. We just had two within a couple minutes of each other. So things are looking like they're picking up pretty fast. So heads up, earthquake watch will remain in effect out here for the Oklahoma area. California, we got one earthquake out here on the San Andreas Fault near Pacifica. Very small earthquake. Looking at Northern California, not a whole lot of activity kicking up there at all. Some movement along the Hayward Fault and into the Calaveras Fault zone. Did see a little bit of swarming out here up against the Tehachapi Mountains. It looks like it's just right off I-5 near the Wheeler Ridge Fault. It's a little fault system out there, very capable of producing I think they said a 6.5 to a 7.3 magnitude earthquake in conjunction here with the Palito Fault. I believe that's correct. Not a whole lot of historical data on this area, but man, pretty good swarm of activity there today into that region. Southern Cal, further south, not a whole lot. San Andreas Fault looks pretty quiet, not a whole lot around it. This is very typical, though, here along the San Jacinto Fault zone. Up into the Pacific Northwest. Doesn't look like there's anything new. This activity here was from earlier this morning time frame. Not a whole lot around the New Madrid zone. Pretty quiet. Eastern portion of the country as well. One earthquake way up here in the Gulf of Alaska region near Juneau, Alaska. 2.6 coming in within the last hour. Some activity along the Aleutian Trench and one earthquake here along the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench. Very shallow. That one kicking up earlier this afternoon time frame. Mauna Loa and the area, Pahala area, all showing some activity. No major changes or adjustments there. Just a kind of watching it. It's been swarming quite nicely. Activity here around New Zealand and northward. Not a whole lot of newer activity since the update this morning. Looks like we had a 4.9 near the Papua New Guinea area. Pretty shallow earthquake at about 10 kilometers, well northeast of the Port Moresby area. But aside from that, majority of this quake activity, some older movement from this morning time frame. Same for over here around the Mediterranean area, 4.1 in Turkey. That one coming in earlier this afternoon. Italy as well, 4.3. Puerto Rico, seen some typical swarming here. The only concern I have right now is the Oklahoma area. That's kind of swarming abnormally. It's an odd deal, folks, to see that many earthquakes here in a confined area. 182 earthquakes in Oklahoma in one area. That's very abnormal. Yes, Oklahoma does see some swarming and earthquake activity, but nothing on this type of scale. So that's why it's got my attention. And I think if you live out here around the southern plains, definitely should get your attention as well. Just be on guard, have an earthquake plan out there. A lot of older buildings out there throughout the little small towns. Also, Oklahoma City, again, sits only about 30 miles from this earthquake swarm. A big 5.8 out there would definitely do some damage to the OKC area. All right, Yellowstone National Park. Let's go ahead and check this out here real quick, see what we got. Double check. Not a whole lot here within the last few hours. Things have kind of calmed down. Earlier this morning and afternoon, yes, a couple small microquakes, but things are pretty mellow throughout the rest of the evening. 464 epicenters of tremor along the Cascadia subduction zone today, and we are noticing a little migration here towards the southern section of the Cascadia, with a looks like a little migration into Northern California, underneath Northern California. So this has been an ongoing event as well. No major changes though noted at the let's go back here to the Usgs Map. No major changes noted there across the board as far as earthquake activity goes up here. None, zero. So not for sure what's going on. Either they're not reporting it, I don't know. But things are very, very quiet out there for right now. Solar weather activity. Did see an M flare kick off here a little bit ago. Kind of recovering from that on the DRAP map. Little M, looks like a 1.5 solar flare coming up. Kind of recovering from that, but we are staying elevated into the C flare category. So a little on the surprising. That it's coming from 3112, it looks like. Look at these massive features here. This thing all of a sudden wants to get active. That is now that it's not facing Earth. Does that seem? I mean, it almost seems like it's set up that way. Every time we get a massive solar flare, things calm down as it's facing the Earth, and then once it gets away from the facing side of the sun, far as it facing the Earth, things kind of get active again. It's just odd, very odd. Almost seems like it's set up that way. But yeah, kicking off a little bit with some M flares. No major X flare activity yet, but you know, 90% chance for a C flare, 35% chance for an M flare. These are kind of lowered, and this was put out earlier this afternoon time frame, so I'm sure these may get kicked back up. But man, the sun has a way of going against forecasting, and just doesn't want to provide Earth with any type of major flaring. A little on the odd side. All right, no major coronal holes. And again, those sunspots there, 3112, 3119, are saying goodbye. But they're also popping off, you know, some M flares in the process. Behind this, not a whole lot. This one over here looks like it's dying. Not a whole lot of development around this area either. Just kind of quiet there on the sun. But either way, stay safe out there tonight, folks. Again, Oklahoma, heads up. There is a lot of earthquake activity happening out there. And I have lowered, I think I'm going to lower this a little bit more to about 1.6, 1.6 and above for earthquake activity on the globe right now. Normally I don't keep it that low, but with the swarming ongoing out there at Oklahoma, and we can take this way back here. You guys can see of course there's a lot of swarming everywhere, but for Oklahoma, that's a little on the odd side, right? 182 earthquakes here in Oklahoma. Yes, that's something to watch pretty closely. So let me go back here, bring up the don't need to have that many. About 1.7 and above is a good level to watch the earthquake swarm out there. And just be on guard. There's always a chance, folks, a heightened chance of seeing something much bigger with this type of ongoing activity there at the Oklahoma region. So Just a heads up. Stay safe out there. We will chat you guys very soon. Peace out.